they are a citizen scientist. Is that a term that people have come across? It sounds a bit fancy, but maybe some of you are already, if you've contributed to the National Bird Watch that comes up every year, or butterfly surveys, anything like that, then you have contributed to science. And as a citizen scientist, you don't get paid, you do it for the love of it. So you might be finding butterflies, recording them, plants, fossils, even comets. Sometimes amateur astronomers find comets. I'm a citizen scientist here on Clacton Beach, and it's a very interesting place. I think last winter I came across this cuttlefish. I touched it and all these lights went across its back. We had the beast from the east when we had that big cold spell. And a lot of animals were stranded on the beach, comatose. This lobster was just coming round. Well, I didn't take it home to put in a pot, so I put it back in the sea. And then there are human things that have been left on the beach. So this is Ganesha, remover of obstacles and sometimes creator of obstacles. No surprise, because people put their own offerings on the beach when they come down for the annual Ganesha Visarjan, which is a celebration of Ganesha's birthday every September. And it's a history society. I thought I'd better have something historical. So these are some of the finds that I've found. So Clacton Mineral Water Company, cod bottle and salt glaze bottle. One of these pork pie ink pots, and some quite interesting pottery that you sometimes get on the beach, which we don't know where it came from or how old it is. And I found a packet, as you do, of 50 live handgun bullets. And this is a cardboard box that they were in, so they were newly deposited. So I had to call the police and wait for the bomb squad to come and collect them. But other things have been found. It's not a good picture, but anyone, any idea what this might be? It's natural. I know one or two. So it is part of a mammoth tooth. Well, what's that doing on Clacton Beach? But I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's start at the beginning, the war between the land and the sea. Not that war, but Clacton has always been fighting a battle with the sea. We've got soft cliffs that have been eroded away, and we've had different sea defences. So when I first remember, there were wooden groins, and then there became concrete groins, and then blocks of granite, and so on. But as you can see from here, Clacton was losing the battle, to the point 10 years ago that some of the beach was like this. So if you try and get down to the beach, well, first of all, you have to jump the last 6 or 7 feet. This was up in Holland, but lots of parts of the beach were almost as bad. And then when you got on the beach, it was all sorts of detritus just on top of the London clay. Bits of concrete, bits of metal, and much of the beach was closed. And it extended over the whole length of the beach between the pier and Holland Haven. Well, the local council, they tried to get some money, and eventually they got funding, £35 million, mostly from the Environment Agency, some from County Council, and some of their own money. And I think this plays, this is what they did with it. So just a short film. So did anyone go and see this happening? Yeah, I thought it was. So rocks from a quarry in Norway. And lots of sand and gravel. Well, I remember there was a bit of a campaign, wasn't there? We demand sand on our beach. Anyone remember that? My councillor, we got a leaflet through the door. I think it was local elections, and the headline on the leaflet was, "We want sand on our beach, not stones." But of course, if you just have sand, it gets blown away. It's more expensive to find. So we ended up with a mixture. Oh, that was it. You get the picture. So the gravel, any of the gravel has been pumped down a pipe from the barges, or has been sprayed onto the beach, and so the fishtail groins were made using the granite blocks from Norway, and the areas in between were filled with gravel and sand, and it's done a good job. It's stabilised, and that's what the beach is like now. And just to compare the two, this is the same spot in Holland. So there's something like 8 metres of sediment being put on there, and this sediment has come from a dredge site 10 miles offshore, a licensed site. And I mentioned mammoth teeth, so I really wanted to find a mammoth tooth. It took me ages, but in the end I did. And there's one over there, in fact the one on the left is. And over the years, it's 10 years since the beach was recharged, I've been lucky enough to find a few. I missed out on the early days. Apparently there was someone called Trevor who was in the local paper who found 7 mammoth teeth in one day. So hundreds. It's really quite spectacular, the amount of fossils that were found. Hard to identify, actually, whether they're woolly mammoths or steppe mammoths, which came beforehand, which were much bigger. You actually need a really good specimen with lots of teeth plates. So if anyone's got one that good, we'd love to see it. But I was finding bones as well. And some bones, you can work out what they are. So here we have 2 bones from an ancient horse, and I've got a few more of them on the table there. And horse teeth. And woolly rhino teeth. Deer antler as well. I missed one out. Yes, and bison or wild oryx, these prehistoric cows, teeth and bones. So when you look at that whole selection of animals that we've got, it seems to indicate that perhaps if they were all occurring together in the same landscape, that it was a very cool landscape, not totally ice, there'll be plants, very sparse though. So there'd be all these creatures, and we call that the mammoth steppe mammal ascended zone. So a sort of a group of animals that would occur together in the same environment, or so we hope. And there would have been other animals, there would have been carnivores, of course, so big cats, hyenas, cave bears. But occasionally people found unusual fossils. So this is part of a walrus jaw. So obviously, even though these animals were on Dogger Land when the North Sea was dry, nearby there would have been coastal habitats. And very, very occasionally people have found hippos. Well, they can't be from this same group of animals because hippos like them. So it's not surprising. You know, we're scraping up a whole load of gravel from an offshore site. There's bound to be different layers, isn't there? Almost all the fossils do seem to be from the same sort of habitat, but occasionally there's others. A bit like if you scraped down, I don't know, Colchester High Street, right down into the ground, you find lots of Roman stuff, medieval stuff, but you'd find a few things from other ages. But people talk about Dogger Land being a bridge between Europe and the British Isles when there was more ice and the sea level was much lower. It was more than a bridge, it was a whole addition to the continent, about another third land area. The whole of the North Sea was dry, most of the Irish Channel. Well, it wasn't just bones that were being found. Especially Clacton Gazette, ancient stone tool discovered on Clacton Beach, find of a lifetime, and it was even in the Daily Mirror. So I looked and looked for things, and then after about a year, I found my first thing that looked like a flint tool. I hadn't ever found anything like this before. I'm going to go through the film again. So we've got to me finding a flint tool. So, this lovely flint implement, who made it? And I know what you're thinking, haven't we just had a talk about flint 2 months ago? How many people came to that one that Matt Pope did? Oh, not too many of you. You can have 2 talks about flint. But, Matt talked about Clactonians, these people 400,000 years ago, who lived on the banks of the Thames or one of the Thames tributaries, and some of their flint implements were found in sites in Jaywick and South North Clacton. But this is a historical thing that he was talking about, really. This was more than 50 years ago. This is something that we can contribute to now, we can go out hunting for things. And if you still want more talks about flints, Nick Ashton is doing a couple of talks at the Jaywick Martello Tower next Tuesday. But both of them would tell you that flint tools haven't been the same through all the periods that humans have been around, that they've developed. So early on, people took a stone and then bashed bits of it and they got a sharp edge. And then we move on to something that's a bit more sophisticated. So this is a hand axe, and I have some from Clacton Beach here. So you have it's a lovely implement with a very sharp edge. Perhaps a bit unwieldy, perhaps. So after that, people started preparing smaller pieces, maybe more suited to particular tasks, maybe easier to carry as well, and to rework. And then as we get nearer our time, we're talking about modern humans here, maybe 10,000 years ago they started using bows and arrows, and they started making these lovely polished axes, which they would halve onto a wooden handle. But you mustn't think of it just as a progression, because people made tools for what their lifestyle was like. You know, if their lifestyle was that they quickly needed just to make some very straightforward tool, then that's the sort of thing they would make. And the Clactonian people, they didn't make hand axes, they made something a lot more simple. But it doesn't mean that they were less sophisticated as people. They were making things that suited them. So I found my stone tool, and I started finding more and more. And were there any of these Clactonian ones? After all, we're quite near these sites where Clactonian people from 400,000 years ago lived. Our beach replenishment starts here, going up to Holland, and the grave site is only 10 miles offshore, so maybe there won't be there. But we haven't really identified flints that look the same as these Clactonian ones. And I should mention that it's also the site of the oldest wooden artefact ever found, again 400,000 years old in a sphere. So, the history of humans in the British Isles, and it goes back a long way. It goes back to a few flints that were found on the Norfolk coast, and also incredibly on the Norfolk coast, older than any other human footprints apart from in Africa. That as the beach got worn away at Haysborough, human footprints were exposed. Difficult to see here, but an aerial view, you can see that they're colour-coded, so various different individuals walked across soft mud, and then later on, maybe as the tide came in, or river sediment settled softly on it, maybe softer sediment, that got washed away, leaving this, which also got washed away very quickly, and not before it was recorded. It's incredible, isn't it? And that dates back to 850,000 years or so, maybe a bit older. And I was trying to think, 850,000 years, how do you visualise that? So I always try and have a different sort of analogy. So imagine you were walking and each pace was a year. So we're walking along 3 paces, go back to the last time England really won the World Cup, another couple of paces, COVID, and so on and so on. 2,000 paces, you come back to the Roman period, and that would take you as far back as Great Clacton Church. If you carried on walking a year at a time, a pace a year, and you wanted to get back to the beginning of the Neolithic period, the beginning of farming in the British Isles, you'd go as far as the Black Boy and Wheeling. But if you wanted to go all the way back to when the first humans, as far as we know, the first evidence we've got of humans landing, occupying the British Isles, that would take you all the way to Aberdeen, 500 miles. We're talking about deep time. We're incredible length of time. But humans weren't here continuously, and the main reason was that we were in the Ice Age, which we still are. We're in an interglacial period, so these warm periods, and in between cold periods, glacial periods. They're not quite straightforward, so within a warm period you get cold spells and vice versa. And human occupation, no surprise that they would have been here during warm periods. They wouldn't have been able to cope with the deep cold. Funnily enough, they didn't get across in the previous warm periods before the last glaciation. Maybe the water rose too quickly because they had to walk across. Some of these early periods we're not quite sure yet which of these periods that humans occupied. Maybe we'll get more evidence. Yeah, so when I was little, I had this little fossil book, and human evolution was so straightforward then. We had ape-like creatures, and gradually they evolved a bit more human-looking. And at the top, it's always European, wasn't it, at the top? You know, the pinnacle of human evolution, as they portrayed it. Of course, we think differently now. As we still. But now we think of things differently. That there were different human types, whether you call them species or varieties. It's a bit contentious, but there were different groups. Some people have catalogued over 20 different ones of our genus Homo, together with other apes. All these since humans split from chimpanzees, and at various times there might have been more than one human species or variety around at the same time. And they might have met as well. They might have been in the same habitats. So it's a very complex picture. And what evidence have we got to try and see which of those humans were here in Britain? So the evidence of bones, the fossils that we've got for more than the last 40,000 years, so we're talking about 96% of that time. The fossils that we've got are from Boxgrove in Surrey, a 500,000-year-old shin bone, or fragment of the shin bone. It does tell you a bit. From the ridges on it, you can see how muscular the person would have been. From Swanscombe in Kent, 3 bits of the cranium of a human, 400,000 years old. And from Honduras in Wales, a few teeth and a bit of jaw, 250,000 years old. That's all we've got. And North West Europe hasn't really got that much more. But we do try and guess from which species were around in Europe what the contenders might be for these stones, for other stones as well that we found. And the first may be those ones that came across 900,000 years ago. Homo antecessor, pioneer man, so he's always called man. Such a shady character, we've got so little information, because I just put some of the skull bones from Spain that were found. Getting a bit nearer, from across Europe and Asia, Heidelberg man. With a brain size almost the same as modern humans. And then we have Neanderthals. And they have brains as large as ours. Size isn't everything, doesn't mean they thought the same way as us. And then we have modern humans coming across. So, in the last 35,000 years. So these stone tools that I was finding, I needed someone to help me identify them. And I was lucky enough to know David Bain, some of you may know him. So he's a local amateur archaeologist, finds lots of flints in the fields around where he lives. And he's also a good networker. So he put me in touch with Rachel Bino, now at Southampton University. And she was the perfect person. She'd identified bones dredged up from the North Sea, from the Ice Age. And she was also working with the early habitation of the British Isles project, working at Happisburgh and other places where these early humans came from. So she knew about flints and she knew about bones. And we've been in touch ever since, and she has taken over this project. A bit inconvenient because she's in Southampton, so I don't see her very often. So she's still very heavily involved and has written up results for it as well. So here's some of the variety of things that I was finding and other people were finding too. So we were finding hand axes, and there's three that you can look at here. They're all very warm, as though maybe they've been washed down rivers, perhaps from another place, not necessarily from the dredge side. And then you've got lots of little things, which, as far as we know, they're the sort of things that modern humans would have used for various reasons. That even made multi-purpose, multi-flint tools. So maybe a side you put several of these in a line so you can harvest your crops in the Neolithic time, or you could put them in lines to make a harpoon. But there are also these very dark flints. I'll tell you what, I'll pass some round. We have some here. Down here.
Are stones fossils? Are stones fossils?
Stones.
I picked up a lovely stone on the beach the other day.
Yeah.
It was like a base. Little holes in it.
Oh, have you brought it in?
No, it's a
look sometime. Yes, not necessarily. A lot of stones do have fossils in, and a lot don't. But keep searching for them. Yeah. So yes, these all these sorts of ones. You can see they've got very bold flaking, and this is all one piece that's been flaked off here. They're very distinctive. And these are the sort of things that were interesting Rachel and David Bain and other paleontologists who were looking at them. Yes, as I said before, sorry, not a very good picture, but these are the sort of Clactonian flints. No hand axes, they get a pebble and they bash bits off to make sharp edges, and they use the flakes that go off. We don't seem to be finding anything like that. But we could well be missing them. These are the sort of things that I'm talking about. So when you've got hundreds of flints, like the twins we found, maybe one or two are of this period, but it's always hard to tell. So, yes, these are the ones I've passed around. They're very distinctive. Lovely dark flint. And if you look on the other side, this is just one flake, so they've been bashed off a core in one kernel. Each one of these has. Very skillful way of doing things. And we were finding others, I've got one or two here, which have scars, flaking scars here, as though maybe they're the cores that the other flints were, that the tools were broken off using these cores. So that indicates that they were making these things on what was the grave site. And this method of making things, we call it prepared core technique. And I'll explain why that's important a bit later on. But instead of, like with the hand axe, instead of just trying to make an edge, it's quite a simple way of doing things. You bash the top, you bash the bottom, you keep bashing each side until you've got an edge. For this, it involves more. You have to look at your core and you have to work it in a particular way. And for these ones, they're named after a place in Paris where they were first found, and they're quite distinctive. In the way that a lot of the tools that they made were points. So you can see here the scar where something like this was broken off. Does that make sense? I think it's quite hard to do because you have to prepare by flaking off things at different angles. So, who made these? At what time? So, the hand axes, they've been made over a long period. In some places in Africa, the same sort of hand axes were made for 1 million years. 1 million years without changing technology. And in the British Isles, it's a period of from about 600,000 to 300,000 years ago. Hand axes could really be from any time over that period. But the Valois prepared core pieces that we've got, they were only made over perhaps 2 integration periods. And really, the quality of things that we've got, just one, this period called stage 7, the warm period is going back. We're in stage 1, and then the previous warm period was 3, 5, 7, and so on. So this is stage 7. That's 200,000 years ago. So, back to our analogy, 1 year, 1 place, that would take you to Spalding, about 100 miles. So we're still talking about long time periods. And, yes, so who were those people? Well, the only people, as far as we know, who were around in the British Isles at that time were Neanderthals. I thought, that's amazing. You know, I thought probably these things that we were finding were old, but they were Homo sapiens. But no, it goes back to a previous variety of humans. So, this technique, I'll just show you a very short film of how this works. So you get a big clump of flint, and you reduce it, you get rid of all these big bits. And that's the same as you do for a hand axe. I actually had a go at doing this. It is quite hard. There are people around who can make stone tools. So now the person is reducing it, trying to visualise what sort of tools they can make from it, or how they can manipulate the shape of it, this core. It's a sort of tortoise shell shape. You know, whether they wanted these points for putting on the ends of their spears, or maybe they wanted scrapers for scraping the fur off a hide. It's thought that they were using more thought in what they were doing. Instead of doing something fairly automatic, there was more cognition involved. This is a theory. And anything I say, you know, you ask questions. You know, don't take my word for it. If you think, well, you know, how do we know that? Ask. And some of it is speculation. With a hand axe, maybe it's analogous to to a bird making a nest, or maybe there was more thought involved. The same with the prepared core. You know, other animals prepare things that are quite complex. So, here's back to my flint again. But it wasn't just me finding one, or finding a few. This is the collection of another beachcomber, Paul, who has 200 of these flints. And this is unheard of. For this period, there's really only about a handful of sites. Half of them are from Victorian times. A lot of them only have, 100 flints. We're finding hundreds and hundreds. And the condition of them as well, it's amazing. These are ones that were made where the dredge site was, and were dumped there. They haven't been travelling down rivers, they haven't been in glaciers or anything like that. They're in really good condition. And considering they were pumped down a pipe or sprayed onto the beach, they're in good condition for that as well. So we were finding more and more flints, and more people were becoming interested. So here's Rachel, here's Becky Scott from the British Museum, who is now one of the world's leading experts on Neanderthals, especially for this period. She's involved with digs on Gibraltar, Spain, all over the place. And Adam Whiteman, also very knowledgeable he's now director of the Colchester Archaeology Trust. So lots of people were looking at these things, and here again another couple of experts. So we have Catherine Price, who is now involved with Reading University, and Rob Davis, who was one of the people in the team that discovered the first evidence of humans creating fire in Suffolk. It was news headlines, wasn't it? Even on the television. So we're 12 people were good enough to trust us with their flint collections, and we measured them, we interpreted them, we photographed them, because the more you look at, the more you can interpret information. And if you've got 10, it's far better than 1. If you've got 100, it's better than that. You can do more statistics. So these biscuit tins, they're not full of biscuits, they're not full of our breaks. They've got lots of flints in. So we looked at all those. But even so, we've got all this information from the flint artefacts. We haven't got other artefacts, and they would have used wooden tools, bone tools as well. And you compare it to, this is a site in Colchester, an archaeological site, layer by layer. You dig down, you have little labels where different things were found. You can take pollen from different levels and so on. You know, you've got all this information. And what have we got? We haven't even got the best of prehistoric stuff. This is the site at Bloxgrove where people made hand axes. They squatted down, they had the bit of flint and their hammerstone, and they broke off flakes, and between their legs the flakes fell. So the gap here, these are the flakes that fell, and then another layer went on top. So this was in situ as well. And what have we got? We've got things that have been sprayed or chucked on the beach. So what can we learn from it? Well, we can infer things about Neanderthals to begin with. So this is where Neanderthal flints and bones have been found. Firstly in this area, they seem to have originated in Europe. And gradually they spread further afield to really quite harsh places. I mean, today, these are harsh places in the winter, aren't they? Continental climates. Neanderthals must have worked together well. They must have been socially quite advanced, creating places to live, living in caves, or creating their own protection. And then, as I just mentioned, where Rob Davis was working, and Nick Ashton was talking on Tuesday, we'll be talking about this. So this is Barnum in Suffolk, where this was discovered. So first of all, it was a site that had been excavated for many years, where an ancient river was. The river sediment, 400,000 years old. A few stone tools were found there. And then evidence of fire. So, not just random fire, but areas where there were fire pits, where there had been repeated fires. So it was obviously a sort of settlement, a temporary settlement. But within that, this was found. And he thought, what that is? It's a piece of pyrite. And you don't get pyrite there. In fact, from the vicinity, 100,000 stones were looked at, and none of them were pyrite. So this has been brought in from another area. And the reason is that you bash pyrite against flint and you get sparks. And that was the missing piece of the jigsaw to show that they were really creating fire. Before that, we only had evidence from 50,000 years ago. This set it back to 400,000 years ago. So it's another thing that we know about Neanderthals. Did they actually do things beyond the practical? Did they create art? So apparently there's caves, and this is one in Spain, where there's these markings, and you can date them because within the cave you get layers. This was on a stalactite, I think. No, the cave wall, but you get layers then put on top naturally. Stuff runs down the walls, and you can date that. And apparently this dates back to 80,000 years when only Neanderthals were around. This figure is from later, these figures. The abstract patterns seem to have been created by Neanderthals. Is that another sign of intelligence? And then, did anyone notice something unusual about this picture of the Neanderthals? If we focus here, this person, they're missing their right arm. And of course this is a reconstruction with in a museum. But they recreated this one with a hand missing, with a withered arm, because a Neanderthal fossil was found, a skeleton, with that happening. So that's evidence, and there's other evidence from other skeletons, Neanderthals with very advanced arthritis or profound deafness that they could tell from the ear bones. So Neanderthals looked after vulnerable people, which we like to think of as a very advanced characteristic. And then there's one or two places where they did something really weird. So this is a cave, the entrance is 300 metres away. So in darkness, Neanderthals broke off stalactites and stalagmites and put them in rings. And again, it can be dated back 175,000 years. Why did they do that? They would have had to live like a cave. Why go that far into it? It's all a bit weird. But we also have our dread site. And we had a lucky break because when the licence expired, the companies involved in dredging, they no longer had to keep their data secret as to how valuable the sediment was, how thick different layers were, what it was suitable for. They seemed to keep all this stuff secret, but it had no value to them once the licence expired. So they gave Rachel at Southampton University all their sonar data, which can be used not just to look at the topography of the sea floor, here, but you can look at layers underneath, and where the material on Clacton Beach was dredged, around here, it seems to be possibly an area between watercourses, definitely a watercourse here, which maybe those hand axes popped out of. Maybe we're not so sure here, but this seems a fairly stable, perhaps a floodplain, and maybe that seems to be probably where stone tools came from. But these blobs are corns, sample corns. So Rachel had access to those. And you can go down through them. There's modern sort of sediment, last 10,000 years. But below that, there's sediment, and there's so much you can do with that. So her colleagues did various things, including an amazing technique called optically stimulated luminescence. So if you have feldspar or quartz crystals hidden in the dark, they gradually gain energy from the sediment around them. But they have to be kept in the dark. And then when they expose to light, they release that energy and you can measure it. So out of all those cores, there was one that looks like it had sediment in the middle that had never seen daylight, and they tried measuring that. They took a few samples. And when they did that, this is the measurement, and you can't see that because it's blurred. Trust me on this one. It goes back to 200,000 years ago. So it completely corroborates the style of the flints that we've got. And there's other things that you can find. They looked at snail shells in the sediment cores. They looked at beetles, because these all, if you know what species it is, you identify the species, you know what sort of habitats and temperatures it lived in. And they looked at pollen as well. Pollen is very robust, lasts millions of years. So from all that, they're getting a picture of this landscape from this period. And maybe something like this. So there were open areas and there were wooded areas. So there was pollen from grasses, sedges, and sort of pioneering and secondary tree species, the ones that move in fast, and ones that cope with the cold a bit better. So oak, hazel, Scots pine, willow alder, and then there were species of open habitat, like plantain. And there were species that had a coastal element, so maybe that corroborates with the thing with the tusk. No, not the mammoth, the walrus. Yes, the walrus. So maybe that makes a bit more sense. So there were coastal plants as well, swift, seaweed. It was pollen from freshwater plants, like bulrush and meadowsweet. And from sandy, heathy areas as well. So hazel heath, cowberry. So maybe we're getting a bit more of a picture of a habitat for most of that interglacial period. Does that tie in with the big animals? Can we say that they came from the same period as our humans, our Neanderthals? Did the Neanderthals even hunt these animals? Well, unfortunately, we haven't got enough evidence yet, or we haven't got any evidence, so to speak, because most of the sediment that came up, looking at those core samples, was from that period 200,000 years ago. We can say that these animals are likely to be from that period. So there's a connection. But they might have been from when it's getting colder. Our Neanderthals could very well have just hunted horses and survived that way. says the older ones, and gradually as you go down the coast, you get to younger bones, younger sediment they come from. So that's another indication that maybe some of the bones that we're finding are from the surface, from younger ages. We can't say for sure. But we've got all this information, we've done our studies, so there's no more keeping it to ourselves and the scientists. So we've tried to publicise it, we've had articles in the local paper, and Clacton History Society have contributed as well with displays of beach finds. We've taken displays to other shows, and we had a prehistoric road show, which was good for us because then other people came along who we didn't know about and showed us their finds. But why did Neanderthals become extinct? And I've got an analogy here, again, that maybe, so Mo Farah represents modern humans. This rugby player, I still can't find out who it is. He represents Neanderthals, bulkier, slower, modern humans, far more adapted to running after prey, running longer distances. Neanderthals would have probably ambushed their prey in a more forested area, stabbed it with their spears, quite dangerous really. The modern humans that came along would have perhaps wounded the animals and then tracked them. So modern humans were far more adapted to open habitats, and around this time habitats were becoming more open, and maybe it was just factors like that that Neanderthals couldn't cope with so well. I'm not convinced because, modern humans vary a lot, don't they? From one area to another. People in the Andes are perhaps more stocky, shorter, adapted to higher altitudes. And one type of human can evolve quite quickly. So it's not necessarily the right idea. We're speculating again. It could have been direct competition. But various things might have meant that Neanderthals were competing with sapiens. And these other environmental pressures that I'm talking about, changes in habitat, changes in climate. Or it could have been that Neanderthals never got to a critical size of population. At the same time, human populations were just as small. And you've got a small population, individual groups become isolated, they might lose techniques like making fire, they might end up inbreeding, they can't cope with maybe one bad winter to finish them off. And that nearly happened with modern humans. There's a period 100,000 years ago where they nearly disappeared. We can tell that from how very similar we all are in our genetics. So we don't really know, but we're still trying to find more information. And the big thing now is we can look at the genome, we can look at all the genes of modern humans and now Neanderthals. And we can look at individual genes. We can put those genes into things like human brain cells, or stem cells I should say, that can be developed into a clump of human brain cells, or other tissues, any tissues, and you can transfer a Neanderthal gene into that and see what difference it makes. So we're getting more and more information about the difference in genes that Neanderthals have, but what those genes were for, and we're finding out that they're things towards having protection against diabetes, or having perhaps a different quality of language. It's all in the early stages. And then, I think this is amazing, you can actually get DNA out of sediment. So maybe where our Neanderthals were at the growth site, maybe one day we'll be able to dig up sediment and actually find DNA in it. So just in conclusion, yes, ground truthing, lovely term I think, is we've got our Neanderthal evidence on the beach, but out at sea, that's where the ground truth is. That's where there's lots of things, probably things to discover, maybe modern artifacts, who knows what. These Neanderthals produced a variety of high quality tools for various tasks. When you have a look at the tools, you can see they're for different things. Some are pointy, some are more suited to other things. There's no absolute evidence of tool making on site. Yes, we've got cores, but it seems that Neanderthals, they carried cores around, and then when they needed to make a tool, they would make it then and there. But we don't have flakes on the beach that indicate that tool making, that things were being flaked off. We only have the end product. We don't have those primary flakes. Remember that little film where he's taking a flint nodule and bashing bits off? We don't have those initial flakes at all. And these were some of the last humans in Britain. So the previous warm period, humans didn't get here. The only humans that were here before sapiens came 35,000 years ago were our Neanderthals and similar groups. And they seem to live in a cool open landscape, not desperately cold, somewhere near the coast. And there isn't any direct evidence linking them to our megafauna. If we find a bone with butchery marks on, that will make a difference. So, that's it.